Book title, Heavens Forsaken, The Agony of an Eternal Love. Written and copyright by A. Castor. Book 2, Scene 22, The Papal State in Crisis. Interior, Papal Palace, night. The grand dining hall of the Papal Palace is a lavish display of wealth and power. Chandeliers hang from the high ceiling, casting a warm golden light over the long table set with fine china and crystal goblets. The walls are adorned with tapestries depicting biblical scenes, and the air is filled with the scent of roasted meats and freshly baked bread. At the head of the table sits Pope Alexander Fis, an imposing figure with a stern face and piercing blue eyes. He is dressed in rich crimson robes embroidered with gold, a large ornate cross hanging around his neck. His appearance exudes power and authority, but his eyes are sharp with cunning and self-interest. Seated around the table are his ministers, cardinals, and other high-ranking officials, all dressed in traditional ecclesiastical garb. The cardinals wear red cassocks with white surplices, while the ministers are in more subdued black robes. The tension in the room is palpable as they discuss the dire situation facing the Papal State. We are faced with a crisis unlike any we have seen before. The undead horde is spreading, and our kingdom is in danger. We have spent too long focusing on wars with other kingdoms, and now we must turn our attention to this new threat. He looks around the table, his eyes lingering on each of his advisors. Pope Alexander VI, continuing. The Papal State is a theocracy, governed by the will of God and the decisions of the Holy See. Our governance is built upon the foundation of faith and the guidance of the Church. We elect our leaders through a conclave of cardinals who vote in secret to choose the Pope. This system has served us well for centuries, but now we face an unprecedented challenge. Cardinal Angelo, dressed in red cassock. Holy Father, what are we to do? Our armies are prepared for war against other kingdoms, not for fighting the undead. Our soldiers are trained to face human foes, not these abominations. You are right, Cardinal Angelo. We are ill-prepared for this new enemy, but we cannot afford to be complacent. We must adapt and find a way to protect our people and our kingdom. He pauses, looking down at the plate before him, his brow furrowed in thought. The Christian world is divided, busy waging war against itself. Kingdoms fight for power and territory, while the true threat grows in the shadows. We have been blinded by our own ambitions, and now we must face the consequences, dressed in black robes. Holy Father, we have always relied on our faith to guide us, but faith alone may not be enough to stop the undead. We need a plan, a strategy to combat this menace. You are right, Giovanni. Faith must be accompanied by action. We must mobilize our resources and seek help from those who have experience with these creatures. He looks up, meeting the eyes of each of his advisors in turn. We need to consult with the Holy Order of Crocinium. They have faced the forces of hell before and emerged victorious. Their knowledge and expertise will be invaluable in this fight. Dressed in red cassock, the Holy Order has always been a bulwark against the darkness, but even they may not be enough. We need to unite the Christian kingdoms, bring them together to face this common threat. Indeed, Cardinal Riccardo, we must put aside our differences and work together. The survival of our people and our faith depends on it. Minister dressed in black robes, concerned. But how do we convince the other kingdoms to join us? They are more concerned with their own conflicts and ambitions. Pope Alexander VI. We must appeal to their sense of faith and duty, remind them that we are all part of the same Christian world and that we must stand together against the forces of darkness. He stands, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Pope Alexander sick. We are the shepherds of God's flock, and it is our duty to protect them. We cannot allow the undead to consume our world. We must fight with all our strength and faith to preserve the light of our faith. The room falls silent as the weight of his words sinks in. The cardinals and ministers exchange worried glances, but there is a renewed sense of determination in their eyes. We will do whatever it takes, Holy Father. We will gather our forces, consult with the Holy Order, and seek the support of the other kingdoms. We will not let the undead prevail. Pope Alexander VI. We must act swiftly and decisively. There is no time to waste. As the meeting continues, the conversation turns to practical matters, mobilizing the army, securing supplies, and sending emissaries to the other kingdoms. The mood is tense, but there is a sense of purpose and resolve. Minister should also consider fortifying our cities and towns. The undead are relentless, and we must be prepared to defend our people at all costs. Yes, we need to strengthen our defenses and ensure that our soldiers are equipped with the knowledge and weapons needed to combat the undead. Pope Alexander VI, make it so. We will spare no expense in protecting our kingdom and our people. Interior Papal Palace, later that night. The grand dining hall is now empty, save for Pope Alexander VI and a few close advisors. The Pope leans back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. He sips a glass of red wine, his eyes distant as he contemplates the challenges ahead. This is a delicate situation. We must navigate it carefully. The undead are a threat, but so too are our enemies within the Christian world. Holy Father, we will stand by you. We will do whatever it takes to ensure the safety of our kingdom. I know, Angelo, but we must be strategic. We cannot afford to show weakness. He sets down his glass and stands, walking over to a large map of the Christian kingdoms spread out on the table. He traces the borders with his finger, a frown creasing his brow. Pope Alexander VI, we must secure alliances. We need to bring the other kingdoms together under our banner. Only then can we hope to stand against this threat. But Holy Father, how do we convince them? Many of the kingdoms are at war with each other. They may not see the undead as a greater threat. Pope Alexander VI, we will use their fear. We will show them the true horror of the undead. Once they understand the danger, they will have no choice but to join us. Exterior Papal Palace. The grand facade of the Papal Palace stands as a symbol of the Church's power and influence. Guards in ornate armor patrol the grounds, their eyes sharp and vigilant. The moon casts a pale light over the palace, highlighting its majestic architecture. Interior Papal Palace, study. Pope Alexander VI sits at a large mahogany desk, surrounded by books and documents. The weight of leadership rests heavily on his shoulders, but his resolve is unshaken. He picks up a quill and begins to write a letter, his expression one of intense focus. Pope Alexander VI, to the leaders of the Christian kingdoms, I beseech you to join us in this fight against the undead. Together, we can overcome this darkness and protect the world we hold dear. As he writes, the scene shifts to a sequence of the Papal State's preparations. Soldiers donning armor, priests blessing weapons, and messengers riding out to deliver the Pope's plea for unity. Soldiers are gathered, their faces determined as they prepare for the coming battle. They check their weapons and armor, listening intently to their commanders. Commanders, we fight not just for our kingdom, but for all of Christendom. The undead are a scourge that must be eradicated. Stand strong, stand together, and we will prevail. Interior Church. Priests and acolytes gather around a large altar, chanting prayers and performing rituals. They bless the soldiers and their weapons, invoking divine protection. May the Lord's light guide you and protect you. Go forth with courage and faith. Exterior Papal Palace. Messengers mount their horses, ready to deliver the Pope's letters to the leaders of the Christian kingdoms. The gates open, and they ride out into the night, their mission clear. Papal Palace, study. Pope Alexander VI seals the letter with a heavy wax seal, pressing his ring into the hot wax. He looks up, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and wariness. We must prevail, for the sake of our faith and for the future of our world. The grand dining hall now stands empty and silent. The Pope's advisors have dispersed, each to their own tasks, leaving the Pope alone with his thoughts. Interior Papal Palace, private quarters. In the privacy of his chambers, Pope Alexander VI removes his heavy robes and dons a simpler garment. He sits by a window looking out at the city below. The lights of the city flicker, a stark contrast to the darkness that threatens to engulf them. Pope Alexander sictive to himself. I have made many enemies, both within and outside these walls. But now we face a common enemy. We must stand united or we will fall. He takes a deep breath, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. He knows that the road ahead will be difficult, but he is determined to lead his people through the darkness. Interior Papal Palace, Chapel. Pope Alexander VI kneels before the altar, praying for guidance and strength. The chapel is dimly lit, the only light coming from the flickering candles. He bows his head, his hands clasped tightly. Lord, grant me the wisdom to lead and the strength to protect. In this time of great need, may your light shine upon us and guide us through the darkness. Interior Papal Palace Private Dining Room, Night. In a more private and opulent setting, Pope Alexander VI sits at a smaller, richly adorned table. He is no longer alone. By his side is his concubine, a beautiful woman with dark hair and piercing green eyes, dressed in luxurious silks. Across the table sit his children, Cesare and Lucrezia, both strikingly attractive and dressed in the finest attire. The table is laden with a feast, and the atmosphere is more relaxed, though the Pope's mind is still preoccupied with the looming threat. Pope Alexander VI to family. In these troubled times, we must find strength in one another. A handsome young man, confident. To family, Father, we will face whatever comes together. Lucrezia, a beautiful young woman, serene. We have faith in you, Father. The Papal State will prevail. The Pope's concubine leans closer, her eyes filled with a mix of admiration and concern. My love, you carry such a heavy burden, but I believe in you. We all do. Sighing. Thank you. Your support means more to me than you can know. Interior Papal Palace. After the meal, Pope Alexander VI retires to his study once more, the weight of his responsibilities ever present. He sits at his desk, writing letters and making plans, determined to lead his people through the coming storm. As the night deepens, the Pope reflects on the challenges ahead. His determination is unwavering, and he knows that with faith, cunning, and the support of his family and advisors, they will find a way to overcome the darkness.
Interior Papal Palace, Night.
Before retiring for the night, Pope Alexander VI returns to the chapel, kneeling before the altar once more. His prayers are fervent, seeking strength and guidance for the battles to come. Lord, be with us. Guide us through this darkness and help us to emerge victorious. In your name we fight, and in your name we place our trust. The Pope remains in prayer, his heart heavy with the weight of his duties, but his resolve strengthened by his faith and the support of those around him. Fade out.